Good evening, dear friends, and welcome back to Mystic Bedtime Stories. I'm your narrator for tonight's journey, and I'm so grateful you've chosen to spend these quiet hours with us. Whether you're settling into bed after a long day, finding a moment of peace in your evening routine, or simply seeking that gentle transition from the busy world into restful sleep, you've found the right place. Tonight, we're embarking on something truly special. We're leaving behind the familiar shores of our daily lives and setting sail across the vast Pacific Ocean, not as tourists or casual observers, but as honored guests of the greatest navigators our world has ever known. We're going to discover the whispers of the Sea Kings of Polynesia, those remarkable navigators who transformed the endless blue into highways of wonder. Picture yourself now, if you will, standing on a moonlit beach somewhere in the heart of the Pacific. The sand beneath your feet is still warm from the day's sun, and each wave that rolls onto shore brings with it stories that have been traveling for thousands of years. The stars above you shine with an intensity you've never quite noticed before, each one a beacon, a guide, a friend to those who know how to read their ancient language. This is not just any ocean. This is the Pacific as the Polynesian navigators knew it, a living, breathing entity that connected rather than separated, that welcomed rather than threatened. Tonight, you're going to understand what it meant to be truly at home on the water, to read the sea's moods like pages in a beloved book, and to trust in wisdom passed down through countless generations. As we begin this journey together, I want you to let your shoulders relax completely. Feel the tension of the day melting away like sea foam dissolving into sand. Your breathing is becoming slower, deeper, matching the rhythm of these ancient tides. Tonight, there's nowhere you need to be, nothing you need to accomplish, no urgency calling your name. You are exactly where you belong, in this moment, in this story, letting yourself drift on currents of wonder and peace. The Polynesian people understood something profound about time and space. They knew that the ocean was not empty water to be crossed as quickly as possible, but a rich, complex world to be experienced fully. They sailed not with haste, but with presence, not with anxiety, but with trust. And tonight, that's exactly how we're going to move through this story together. With the unhurried grace of a traditional sailing canoe riding the trade winds, imagine now that you're settling into the hull of one of these magnificent vessels, a double-hulled canoe that has been blessed by generations of skilled hands. The woven mats beneath you are soft and warm, and you can feel the gentle, reassuring motion of the boat as it rides the swells. This is not the harsh rocking of a storm-tossed ship, but the soft, maternal rhythm of the ocean in one of her gentler moods. The navigator beside you, weathered and wise, with eyes that have seen 1,000 dawns reflected on open water, speaks in a voice barely above a whisper. "Rest now," he says. "Let the sea carry you where you need to go." She knows the way to places you've forgotten you were searching for. We're going to spend the next 2 hours together, you and I, exploring not just the geographic wonders of Polynesia, but the deeper currents of human courage, wisdom, and connection to the natural world. We'll visit islands that exist both on maps and in dreams, meet people who saw the stars as family members, and discover how the vast Pacific Ocean became not a barrier, but the world's greatest highway of cultural exchange and human achievement. But more than anything else, we're going to let this story work its gentle magic on your mind and body, allowing you to sink deeper and deeper into that perfect state between waking and sleeping, where the most wonderful journeys begin. You might find that by the end of our time together, you've not only learned about the Sea Kings of Polynesia, but you've also found that place of perfect rest you've been seeking. So, settle in now, dear friend. Pull your blankets a little closer, adjust your pillow to that perfect spot, and let your eyes grow heavy as we set sail together across the starlit waters of the Pacific. The ancient navigators are waiting to share their secrets, and the ocean is ready to sing you the lullabies that have soothed travelers for over 1,000 years. The journey begins now as we drift away from the familiar coastlines of today and toward the mystical realm of the Polynesian sea kings, where every wave carries wisdom, every star tells a story, and every gentle breath of wind whispers of adventures that transform the soul. Our first destination lies ahead in the soft darkness, where the boundaries between ocean and sky, between past and present, between waking and dreaming, begin to blur in the most beautiful way. Come, let's sail together into the heart of Polynesia, where the greatest stories ever told were never written down, but live forever in the rhythm of the waves and the dance of the stars above. As your breathing grows even more relaxed and your mind drifts with the gentle currents, let me paint for you a picture so vast and beautiful that it challenges everything we think we know about distance and possibility. Imagine, if you can, spreading a map of the Pacific Ocean across your bedroom floor. Now imagine that map growing larger and larger until it fills your entire house, then your neighborhood stretching out until it encompasses an area larger than all the continents of Earth combined. This is Polynesia, but not as you might picture it from a geography textbook. This is Polynesia as the ancient navigators knew it, a living triangle of wonder floating in the world's greatest ocean. Picture 3 points of light glowing in the darkness of space. The first gleams far to the north, where the Hawaiian Islands rest like emerald jewels scattered across the deep blue. The second shimmers to the southeast, where New Zealand, which the Maori call Aotearoa, the land of the long white cloud, stretches its green arms into the southern seas. And the third point sparkles far to the east, where tiny Rapa Nui, Easter Island, sits in splendid isolation, home to those mysterious stone giants that gaze eternally across the waves. Connect these 3 points in your drowsy imagination, and you've drawn the boundaries of something extraordinary. This triangle encompasses more than 10 million square kilometers of ocean, making it one of the largest cultural regions our planet has ever known. To put this in perspective, you could fit all of Europe, all of North America, and still have room left over within this watery realm that the Polynesian people called home. But here's what makes this story so remarkable, so perfectly suited for this quiet hour as you drift toward sleep. The Polynesians didn't just stumble upon this vast territory by accident. They didn't have steel ships or diesel engines or GPS satellites. They explored and settled this enormous expanse of ocean using nothing more than wooden canoes, human courage, and wisdom so profound it still takes our breath away today. Think about that for a moment as you sink deeper into your pillow. In your comfortable bed, surrounded by all the conveniences of modern life, it's almost impossible to imagine the audacity, the sheer breathtaking courage it took to push off from a known shore and sail into the endless blue, trusting in the stars, the waves, and generations of accumulated knowledge to guide the way to lands that existed only in stories and dreams. These weren't desperate refugees fleeing disaster, though some certainly were. Many were explorers, adventurers, families seeking new opportunities, young people hungry for challenge and discovery. They set out across distances that would make a modern sailor's heart race, carrying with them everything needed to start civilization. On a new island, pigs and dogs, taro and sweet potato, the tools and knowledge and stories that would allow their culture to take root and flourish thousands of miles from anywhere they had ever called home. As you rest there, feeling so perfectly safe and secure, let yourself marvel at the confidence these ancient navigators possessed. They knew with absolute certainty that if they sailed in the right direction at the right time, reading the signs that the ocean and sky provided, they would find land. Not someday, not maybe, but they would find it. This wasn't blind faith, it was knowledge, tested and refined and passed down through countless generations of navigators who had made these journeys before. The Pacific Ocean that terrified European explorers, that they saw as a hostile emptiness, to be crossed as quickly as possible, was to the Polynesians something entirely different. It was a neighborhood, it was a highway, it was home. They saw connections where others saw only separation, paths where others saw only peril, welcome where others found only wilderness. Consider the gentle audacity of it all. While most of the world's peoples were still hugging coastlines, never venturing far from familiar shores, the Polynesians were island hopping across distances that stagger the imagination. They were visiting family on islands separated by stretches of open ocean that would take weeks to cross. They were establishing trade routes across empty seas that connected cultures separated by thousands of miles of rolling waves, and they did all of this so naturally, so skillfully, that by the time European explorers arrived in the Pacific, they found thriving communities on nearly every habitable island. People who had been living in these remote paradises for centuries, completely at home in their scattered island world. Tonight, as sleep begins to claim you, let yourself float in the wonder of this achievement. Let your mind drift like one of those ancient canoes across the starlit waters of the great Polynesian Triangle. Feel yourself becoming part of this story, this incredible chapter in human courage and ingenuity, where the ocean was not an obstacle to overcome but a friend to embrace, not a barrier to cross but a home to inhabit. The trade winds are filling our imaginary sails now, carrying us deeper into this story, toward islands that shimmer in the distance like dreams becoming real. The stars above are brightening, each one a familiar friend to the navigators who knew their names and their stories, who could read in their movements the location of islands still beyond the horizon. Rest now, and let the vast triangle of Polynesia cradle your imagination as we sail onward through this night toward the next chapter of our journey, where we'll discover the remarkable vessels that made these impossible voyages not just possible, but routine, and meet the extraordinary people who could read the ocean like a book written just for them. As your body settles deeper into that perfect state of relaxation, let me introduce you to perhaps the most elegant solution to ocean travel ever devised by human ingenuity. Picture yourself standing on a pristine beach at dawn, watching as the morning mist slowly lifts to reveal something that seems to float between dream and reality. There, riding gently on the swells just beyond the reef, is a vessel unlike anything you've ever seen. It's not a single boat, but two sleek hulls, connected by a platform of woven coconut fiber and carefully selected timber. Waka, a double-hulled, voyaging canoe, and it represents one of humanity's most perfect marriages of form and function, beauty and practicality. From your position on the beach, you can see how the twin hulls slice through the water with barely a whisper, creating almost no wake despite the canoe's impressive size. Some of these vessels stretch longer than a modern city bus, yet they move through the waves with the grace of a seabird skimming the surface. The platform between the hulls provides living space for entire families, storage for supplies that must last weeks at sea, and workspace for the daily tasks of ocean life. Feel yourself relaxing even more as you imagine stepping aboard one of these magnificent craft. The platform beneath your feet is surprisingly stable, supported by the twin hulls that distribute weight and motion so evenly that even in moderate seas, vessel fighting against the waves, but something far more harmonious. A design that works with the ocean's natural rhythms rather than against them. The sail billowing above you is woven from pandanus leaves, creating a surface that catches the wind with gentle efficiency. It's not the rigid, driving power of a modern sail, but something more subtle, more responsive to the nuanced moods of the Pacific trade winds. The entire vessel seems alive, breathing with the sea, responding to conditions with an almost organic sensitivity that makes you feel less like you're riding on top of the ocean, and more like you're part of it. But the real magic of these voyaging canoes isn't in their construction, remarkable though that is. The true wonder lies in the people who sailed them, the wayfinders, the navigators, whose skills bordered on the supernatural. These were individuals who underwent training so rigorous, so comprehensive, that it transformed not just their knowledge, but their very way of perceiving the world around them. Imagine yourself as a young student of navigation, lying on your back in the hull of a canoe, staring up at the night sky as your teacher. But these aren't just pretty patterns of light to memorize. Each star, each constellation, is part of a vast three-dimensional map that exists only in the navigator's mind and memory. Your teacher's voice is soft, almost hypnotic, as he explains how Altair and Vega create a celestial compass that never fails, how the Southern Cross marks pathways to certain island groups, how the rising and setting of particular stars indicates not just direction, but the time of year, the season, the best winds for traveling to distant lands. As you listen, feeling the gentle motion of the canoe beneath you, you begin to understand that navigation isn't just about finding your way from one place to another. It's about becoming part of a conversation between earth and sky, water and wind, past and present. The wayfinder beside you can read waves in ways that seem almost magical. He explains how swells created by distant storms carry information across thousands of miles of open ocean, how the pattern of waves reflects off islands still beyond the horizon, creating a signature that reveals not just the presence of land, but its direction, distance, even its approximate size and shape. He shows you how to trail your hand in the water and feel these subtle messages, how to read in the ocean's motion stories of islands you've never seen. But perhaps most remarkably, these navigators carried in their minds detailed mental maps of areas larger than continents. They could visualize the positions of hundreds of islands scattered across the Pacific, understanding not just where each one lay, but how they related to each other, what resources each offered, what dangers surrounded them, what families lived there, what stories connected them to the greater web of Polynesian culture. Feel yourself drifting now, carried by the rhythm of waves against the hulls, as you imagine what it would be like to possess such knowledge, such confidence in your ability to find your way across the trackless ocean. These navigators didn't just hope to reach their destination. They knew they would, with the same certainty that you know the sun will rise tomorrow. Their knowledge was tested by generations of successful voyages, refined by centuries of accumulated wisdom, proven by the simple fact that they and their ancestors had been making these journeys for over 1,000 years. The double-hulled canoe rocks gently beneath you now, and you can feel yourself becoming part of this ancient tradition, this unbroken chain of explorers and adventurers who saw the vast Pacific not as an emptiness to fear, but as a rich, navigable highway connecting island homes across impossible distances. The stars above are brightening in your drowsy vision, each one a familiar friend, a reliable guide, a partner in the eternal dance between human courage and natural wisdom. As sleep begins to embrace you more fully, let yourself rest in the knowledge that somewhere in the darkness ahead, guided by stars and waves and the accumulated wisdom of generations, our imaginary voyage continues toward islands that exist in both history and dreams. Places where the boundary between the possible and the magical becomes as fluid as the ocean itself, carrying us toward the next chapter of our journey through the mystical realm of the Polynesian Sea Kings. In the soft twilight between waking and sleeping, where memories blend with dreams and stories become more real than reality itself, there exists a place that every Polynesian navigator carries in their heart. It's called Havaiiki, and whether it was ever a physical location or has always been something deeper, something more essential, is a question that dissolves like morning mist when you truly understand what this mystical homeland represents. Let your mind drift now, carried by currents older than memory, toward this place that exists simultaneously in the distant past and the eternal present. Havaiiki is where souls begin their journey and where they return when their earthly voyaging is complete. It's the source from which all the scattered islands of Polynesia draw their spiritual nourishment, the root from which the great tree of Pacific culture spreads its branches across 10 million square kilometers of ocean. Picture yourself in the deepest part of night, floating in warm, phosphorescent waters, under a sky so thick with stars that the darkness itself seems to glow. In this liminal space, between day and night, between sea and sky, between sleeping and waking, the ancient stories whisper themselves into being. This is how the navigators first learned of Havaiiki, not as a destination to be reached, but as a truth to be experienced, a knowing that settles into your bones like the rhythm of waves against a distant shore. The scholars and archaeologists of today debate the historical reality of Havaiiki. Some point to linguistic evidence, suggesting it might have been located in the Society Islands, perhaps Raiatir, which the ancient Polynesians called Havai'i, the sacred island from which many of the great voyaging expeditions departed. Others trace the word back through time and across cultures, finding echoes in Java, in Savai'i, in Samoa, in the many islands whose names carry this ancient syllable, like a genetic marker passed down through generations of storytellers. But as you rest there in the gentle embrace of approaching sleep, you begin to understand that asking whether Havaiiki was real is like asking whether love is real, or whether courage exists outside the human heart. Havaiiki is the place where all journeys begin, the home that exists in memory and dream, the source of the deep knowing that no matter how far you travel across the trackless ocean, you are never truly lost because you carry within you the eternal coordinates of belonging. Feel yourself sinking deeper now, your breathing slow and steady as the tide, as the ancient stories of Havaiiki wash over your consciousness like warm waves. In these stories, Havaiiki is where the gods dwell, where the first humans learned the arts of navigation and agriculture, where the spirits of ancestors gather to guide their descendants across the dangerous passages between islands. It's described as a place of perpetual abundance, where the breadfruit trees never stop bearing, where the streams run clear and sweet, where the lagoons are always full of fish and the reefs provide protection without confinement. This is not the idealized paradise of tourist brochures, but something deeper and more complex. Havaiiki in the ancient stories is also a place of challenge and transformation, where souls are tested and refined, where the young must prove themselves worthy before they can undertake the great voyages that will spread Polynesian culture across the Pacific. It's simultaneously the most peaceful place imaginable and the most demanding, a homeland that prepares its children for lives of extraordinary courage and endurance. The navigators who sailed from island to island carried Havaiiki with them, not as a memory of a place left behind, but as a living presence that transformed every new landfall into an extension of the sacred homeland. When they discovered a new island, they didn't just colonize it, they planted pieces of Havaiiki in its soil, in its stories, in the names they gave to its mountains and reefs and sacred groves. Each new settlement became another manifestation of the eternal homeland, another point of light in the vast constellation of Polynesian culture. As your consciousness drifts like a canoe riding the night swells, you can feel yourself becoming part of this ancient understanding. Havaiiki isn't somewhere you go to, it's somewhere you carry within you. It's the deep knowledge that no matter how vast the ocean, how distant the destination, how uncertain the journey, you are always traveling toward home, because home is not a place, but a way of being in the world, a relationship with the sacred that no distance can break. The waves are growing softer now, more distant, as if your imaginary canoe is moving into the protected waters of a vast lagoon. The stars overhead seem closer, more personal, each one a familiar face, welcoming you home to this place that exists beyond geography, beyond time, beyond the ordinary boundaries of waking life. This is Havaiiki as the navigators knew it, not a destination, but a presence, not a memory, but a living truth that transforms every journey into a homecoming. In this drowsy state between worlds, you can feel the presence of all those ancient Voyagers who set out from their various islands carrying the spirit of Havaiiki in their hearts, knowing that wherever their double-hulled canoes carried them, they would find ways to recreate the essential elements of home. They carried more than pigs and chickens and taro plants in their vessels. They carried stories and songs, rituals and relationships, ways of seeing and being that would allow the sacred homeland to bloom again in whatever paradise they discovered beyond the horizon. Let yourself rest now in this understanding, feeling the gentle motion of waves that connect all islands, all times, all the scattered children of Havaiiki, who found in the vast Pacific not separation, but the most profound form of unity. A home so large it could embrace entire ocean systems, so deep it could contain all the dreams of all the navigators who ever trusted the stars to guide them safely across the endless blue toward islands that existed first in stories, then in hope, and finally in the magnificent reality of human courage made manifest in wood and sail, and the unshakable faith that the ocean always eventually leads its true children home. As you drift deeper into that perfect space between consciousness and dreams, let your imagination carry you to a time when leadership meant something far more profound than power over others. Picture yourself on a pristine beach at sunrise, watching as a figure emerges from the morning mist walking along the shoreline. This is an alii, a chief, a sea king, whose authority flows not from conquest or accumulation, but from an understanding so deep and complete that the very elements seem to bend to his wisdom. Feel your breathing slow and deepen as you observe this remarkable figure. He moves with the fluid grace of someone who has spent countless hours riding the swells in voyaging canoes, his weathered hands speaking of years spent reading the subtle messages that waves carry across vast distances. But there's something else about him, something that goes beyond physical skill or even navigational expertise. This is a person who understands that true leadership means becoming a bridge between the human world and the sacred forces that govern wind and wave, season and storm. The alii approaches the water's edge and stands perfectly still, and you can see that he's not just looking at the ocean, but listening to it, reading it, engaging in a conversation that has been ongoing since he was a child, learning the ancient ways. He knows that every decision he makes will ripple outward like waves from a dropped stone, affecting not just his immediate community, but the entire web of relationships that connects his island to the greater Polynesian world. Let yourself sink more comfortably into your bed as you imagine what it would be like to live in a society where leadership was understood this way. The alii was not a distant ruler making arbitrary commands from a palace, but someone who lived intimately with his people, sharing their challenges, their celebrations, their daily struggles with the eternal questions of survival and meaning. On a small piece of land, surrounded by endless oceans, these sea kings understood that an island is not just a piece of real estate, but a living system where everything is connected to everything else. The freshwater springs that bubble up from deep underground, the coral reefs that protect the shoreline from storms, the stands of coconut palms that provide food and shelter and fiber, the fishing grounds that yield the protein necessary for survival. All of these existed in delicate balance, and the ali's primary responsibility was to maintain that balance, not just for today, but for generations yet unborn. Picture yourself now as part of a community gathering, sitting in a circle on woven mats as the evening light fades and the stars begin to appear. The alii is speaking, but not in the commanding voice of someone demanding obedience. His tone is conversational, reflective, the voice of someone sharing hard-won wisdom rather than issuing orders. He talks about the signs he's been reading in the behavior of seabirds, the subtle changes in wind patterns that suggest the dry season might be longer than usual this year, the need to adjust fishing practices to ensure that next year's spawning grounds remain healthy and productive. You can feel your eyelids growing heavier as you listen to this ancient form of governance, so different from anything the modern world knows. The ali's authority comes not from his ability to impose his will, but from his demonstrated capacity to read the complex signs that determine whether the community will thrive or struggle in the seasons to come. His people follow him not out of fear, but out of respect for knowledge that has been tested by time and proven by results. The social structure of these island communities was complex but fluid, based more on competence and wisdom than on rigid hierarchies. Below the alii were various levels of chiefs and specialists, each with their own areas of expertise. There were master navigators who could read the stars, master fishermen who understood the movements of different species through the seasons, master farmers who knew which plants would thrive in different soil conditions, master craftsmen who could build canoes capable of surviving 1,000-mile voyages across open ocean. As sleep begins to claim you more fully, let yourself imagine being part of this society where every person's contribution was valued, where leadership was earned through demonstrated ability to help the community navigate the challenges of island life. The alii might be the ultimate decision-maker, but those decisions were informed by a council of experts whose knowledge covered every aspect of survival and prosperity in the island environment. The Sea Kings understood something that the modern world has largely forgotten, that true wealth is not what you can take from the environment, that harvest remains healthy and productive. They managed their islands like master gardeners, understanding that short-term exploitation would lead to long-term disaster, that the ocean's abundance was not unlimited, that every resource must be stewarded with an eye toward the 7th generation yet to come. Feel yourself drifting now on the warm currents of this ancient wisdom as the alii and his council continue their patient work of reading the signs, making the decisions, maintaining the delicate balance that allows human communities to thrive. In some of the most remote and challenging environments on Earth, these were leaders who understood that their authority was borrowed from the land and sea, that their role was not to dominate but to serve as guardians of the sacred relationship between human culture and the natural world. The stars are brightening now in your drowsy vision, and you can sense that our imaginary voyage is carrying us toward new waters, new insights into how these remarkable sea kings created not just sustainable communities but sustainable ways of being human on a planet where the ocean connects everything to everything else, where leadership means becoming a servant of the greater wisdom that flows through wind and wave, star and tide, carrying us gently toward the next chapter of our journey through the mystical realm where human courage and natural wisdom dance together in perfect harmony. As your body settles deeper into complete relaxation, let your mind drift like morning mist rising from a tropical lagoon, carrying you to witness the gentle rhythm of daily life in these island paradises. Picture yourself awakening not to the harsh sound of an alarm clock, but to the soft chorus of tropical birds greeting the dawn, the whisper of trade winds through coconut palms, and the distant murmur of waves caressing coral shores. You're lying on a sleeping mat, woven from pandanus leaves, in a house built not to dominate the landscape, but to live in harmony with it. The walls are made of bamboo that allows the cooling breeze to flow freely through your home, and the roof of palm fronds creates patterns of dancing light and shadow that shift gently with the movement of the trees above. There are no harsh angles here, no materials that fight against the natural world. Everything flows together like a symphony composed by the island itself. Feel yourself becoming part of this ancient morning routine as the community slowly comes to life around you. The first task of each day is to tend the gardens. And what gardens these are! Not the rigid rows of modern agriculture, but living systems that mirror the complexity and abundance of the tropical forest. Taro plants, with their broad, heart-shaped leaves, grow in carefully managed patches where fresh water seeps from underground springs. Their roots, rich in starch, provide the foundation of the island diet. But they're planted not in monotonous rows, but in naturalistic groups that provide habitat for beneficial insects and birds. Let your imagination carry you to the sweet potato patches, where vines spread across the ground in green carpets, their tubers growing fat and sweet in the volcanic soil. These plants came originally from South America, carried across thousands of miles of open ocean by navigators who understood that successful colonization meant bringing not just people, but entire ecosystems to new islands. Bananas hang in heavy clusters from trees that also provide fiber for rope and leaves for cooking and wrapping food. Every plant serves multiple purposes. Every garden is a complex web of relationships between species that support and strengthen each other. As you drift deeper into this peaceful visualization, picture yourself walking through these living gardens in the gentle light of early morning. The coconut palms tower overhead, their nuts providing not just food but water, oil for cooking and lighting, fiber for rope and cloth, and shells that become bowls and tools. Nothing is wasted. Everything has multiple uses, and the trees themselves provide shade and windbreak for the more delicate plants below. The pigs that root through the forest undergrowth are not just livestock, but partners in the management of the island ecosystem. They clear fallen fruit and vegetation. Their rooting helps prepare soil for new plantings, and their waste enriches the earth. The chickens that scratch in the gardens provide eggs and eventually meat, but also serve as living alarm systems, their calls alerting the community to the approach of strangers or the movement of dangerous animals. Feel your breathing slow and deepen as you imagine the remarkable engineering that made life possible on these remote islands. On volcanic islands, where fresh water is precious, the inhabitants created sophisticated systems of terraces and channels that captured rainfall and directed it to where it was needed most. Some of these irrigation systems were so well designed that they're still in use today, hundreds of years after they were first constructed. On coral atolls, where fresh water is even more precious, the islanders became masters of rainwater collection and storage, creating underground chambers lined with coral rocks that could store enough water to last through dry seasons. They learned to read the subtle signs that indicated where fresh water might be found beneath the ground, and they developed techniques for creating artificial freshwater lenses that floated on top of the denser salt water below. But perhaps, most remarkably, they created fish ponds, artificial lagoons where fish could be raised and harvested without depleting the natural reef systems. These ponds were marvels of engineering, with sophisticated sluice gates that allowed fresh fish to enter while keeping the mature fish contained. The ponds were managed like underwater gardens, with different species playing different roles in the ecosystem, some feeding on algae, others on smaller fish, creating a sustainable cycle of abundance that could feed communities for generations. Let yourself sink even deeper into this vision of sustainable plenty as you imagine the daily rhythm of harvesting and sharing. Fishing expeditions that followed seasonal patterns, ensuring that spawning grounds were never overfished. Gathering expeditions to collect seaweed, shellfish, and other marine resources. But always with an understanding of natural cycles and the need to leave enough for the resource to regenerate. The collection of coconuts, breadfruit, and other tree crops, but never more than the trees could spare, while continuing to thrive and produce for the future. Evening comes gently in your imagination, and you find yourself part of a community feast where the abundance of the island is shared. According to ancient customs that ensure everyone has enough, the food is cooked in earth ovens, wrapped in leaves that add their own flavors to the feast. Fish from the morning's catch, vegetables from the gardens, fruits from the trees, all prepared with techniques perfected over generations and seasoned not just with salt from the sea and herbs from the forest, but with the deep satisfaction that comes from living in harmony with the natural world. As sleep draws nearer, feel yourself becoming part of this rhythm of life where human needs and natural abundance exist in perfect balance. These islanders understood something that the modern world is only beginning to remember, that true wealth comes not from taking as much as possible from the environment, but from learning to live within natural cycles in ways that ensure abundance for countless generations to come. The trade winds are growing softer now, carrying you deeper into dreams where gardens grow themselves, where fish swim willingly into nets, where the boundary between human culture and natural abundance dissolves into something that feels less like survival and more like a dance, a gentle partnership between human wisdom and the generous spirit of islands that provide everything their children need to live well in paradise, carrying us gently toward the next movement in this symphony of Pacific life, where voices join in songs that carry stories across generations. In the deepening twilight of your consciousness, where thoughts become as fluid as warm ocean currents, let yourself be carried toward perhaps the most beautiful aspect of Polynesian culture. Picture yourself sitting in a circle on the beach as the last light of day fades from the western horizon and the stars begin their nightly emergence from the velvet darkness above. The sand beneath you still holds the warmth of the day's sun, and the gentle rhythm of waves provides a natural percussion for what is about to unfold. An elderly woman rises from the circle, her movements graceful despite her years, and begins to sway gently in the flickering light of a small fire. Her voice, when it comes, is not loud, but carries with such clarity and purpose that it seems to reach every corner of the island. She is beginning a chant, but this is far more than entertainment or even ceremony. This is how an entire civilization has chosen to remember itself, to preserve its most precious knowledge, to ensure that the wisdom of countless generations will never be lost to the passage of time. Feel yourself relaxing even more deeply as her voice weaves through the night air, creating patterns of sound and meaning that seem to resonate in your very bones. The chant she's performing might be a genealogy, tracing family lines back through hundreds of generations to the gods themselves. But embedded within that genealogy are navigation instructions, descriptions of islands and their resources, seasonal patterns of wind and weather, the location of safe harbors and dangerous reefs, the movements of fish and birds, the proper rituals for ensuring successful voyages. In a culture without written language, these chants were the libraries, the encyclopedias, the textbooks, and historical records. Every important piece of information was transformed into rhythm and melody, making it not just memorable, but impossible to forget. The human brain, you see, remembers patterns and stories far better than it remembers isolated facts. And the Polynesian chanters understood this with a sophistication that rivals anything modern neuroscience has discovered. Let your breathing slow to match the rhythm of the chant as you imagine how these oral traditions were passed down. A young person chosen for their memory and musical ability would spend years learning not just the words, but the precise melodies, the exact rhythms, the subtle variations in tone and emphasis that carried layers of meaning. They would practice 4 hours each day, guided by master chanters who had themselves learned these same songs from their teachers, creating an unbroken chain of knowledge, stretching back to the very beginnings of Polynesian culture. But the chants were not just repositories of practical information. They were also works of art, complex compositions that could move listeners to tears or laughter, that could inspire courage in the face of danger, that could heal emotional wounds and celebrate the full spectrum of human experience. The creation of a new chant was a sacred act, requiring not just technical skill, but deep spiritual insight, the ability to perceive the connections between seemingly unrelated aspects of life and weave them into a unified whole. As you drift deeper into this dreamy state, picture yourself learning to participate in this ancient art form, the hula, that graceful dance that accompanies many of the chants, is not merely decorative movement, but a form of storytelling that uses the entire body to convey meaning. Every gesture of the hands describes elements of the story. The movements of the feet echo the rhythms of waves or the patterns of stars. The expressions of the face convey the emotions and meanings that give life to the words. A dancer performing a hula about navigation might use her hands to show the rising and setting of specific stars, her body to imitate the motion of a canoe riding the swells, her face to express the mixture of excitement and reverence that any navigator feels when setting out across the trackless ocean. The audience doesn't just watch this performance, they participate in it. Their understanding deepened by seeing the stories enacted as well as hearing them sung. Feel yourself becoming part of this living tradition as the night deepens around you and the chants continue. Some tell of legendary navigators who discovered new islands by following flights of birds or reading messages in the patterns of clouds. Others preserve the genealogies of ruling families, but intertwined with information about the locations of sacred sites, the proper seasons for different activities, the relationships between different communities scattered across the Pacific. The most sacred chants were performed only on special occasions, and only by those who had earned the right through years of dedicated study and spiritual preparation. These might include creation stories that explain how the islands themselves came into being, how the first humans learned to navigate by the stars, how the gods taught the arts of agriculture and fishing and canoe building. But even these mythological stories contained practical information, encoded in symbolic language that trained listeners could decode to extract navigation routes, seasonal calendars, and survival techniques. As your consciousness drifts like a canoe riding the night swells, you begin to understand that these chants and songs and dances were far more than entertainment or even education. They were the very foundation of Polynesian identity, the threads that wove together communities separated by thousands of miles of ocean into a single, coherent culture. A navigator arriving at a distant island could establish his credentials and his connections by demonstrating his knowledge of the proper chants, could prove his worthiness to receive hospitality and assistance by showing that he carried within his memory the same stories, the same values, the same spiritual understanding that united all the children of the Pacific. The fire is burning lower now in your imagination, and the voices of the chanters are growing softer, more distant, as if your consciousness is drifting away from the beach toward the deeper waters where dreams and memories blend into something even more profound. You can still hear the melodies, but they're becoming part of the natural symphony of night sounds, the gentle splash of waves, the whisper of wind through palm fronds, the distant call of seabirds settling into their roosts. Let yourself rest now in the knowledge that these songs and stories are still being sung, that the ancient tradition of oral memory continues to this day, carried forward by new generations of chanters and dancers who understand that some forms of knowledge are too precious to entrust to books or computers, too sacred to be preserved in any form other than the living memory of human hearts and voices, carrying us gently toward new waters where the navigation of inner space becomes as important as the navigation of outer oceans, where the stars themselves become teachers in the ancient art of finding your way home. Close your eyes now and imagine yourself floating gently on the vast Pacific Ocean, far from any shore. The wooden hull of an ancient Polynesian voyaging canoe cradles you like a mother's arms. Above, the dome of the night sky stretches endlessly, adorned with more stars than you have ever seen. This is where we discover one of humanity's most profound achievements, the ability to navigate thousands of miles of open ocean using nothing but the wisdom written in the heavens. Tonight, you are traveling with Master Navigator Kahokane, whose weathered hands have guided countless voyages across the endless blue. His eyes, trained from childhood, can read the sky like an open book. As the gentle rocking of the double-hulled canoe lulls you into peaceful relaxation, let his ancient knowledge wash over you like the warm trade winds. Look up, my friend, Kahokane whispers, his voice carrying the cadence of ocean swells. What the modern world calls empty space, we call home. Each star is a guide, each constellation a pathway. Tonight, I will teach you to see the ocean as our ancestors did, not as a barrier, but as a highway marked by celestial signposts. The star compass, known as Te Kavanga in some island traditions, is not a physical instrument. Imagine a great circle surrounding your canoe, divided into 32 segments, each marked by the rising and setting points of specific stars and constellations. This invisible compass rose has guided Polynesian navigators for over 1,000 years, allowing them to cross distances that would challenge even modern sailors. See there, Kahokane points toward the eastern horizon, where a brilliant star begins its nightly ascent. That is Hakulia, the star of gladness, what you might know as Arcturus. When she rises in that exact position, she tells us we are sailing true toward the heart of Polynesia. But stars are just the beginning of our conversation with the ocean. Feel yourself sinking deeper into the woven mats beneath you as the navigator's voice continues, soft as sea foam. The Polynesians understood that the ocean itself speaks to those who know how to listen. Beneath your canoe, the long, steady swells, generated by distant trade winds, create a rhythm as reliable as a heartbeat. These te lapa, or underwater lightning phenomena, were invisible guideposts that expert navigators could feel through the hull of their vessels. Place your hand on the side of the canoe, Kahokane instructs gently. Feel how the swells change direction as they encounter distant islands, creating interference patterns that tell stories of land beyond the horizon. An island disrupts the ocean's rhythm from many miles away, creating a signature as unique as a fingerprint. The ancient navigators trained for decades to develop this sensitivity. They would lie in the shallow lagoons of their home islands, learning to feel the subtle differences in wave patterns with their entire bodies. Some could detect the presence of an island from 40 miles away, simply by reading the conversation between swells and the sea floor. As you drift between sleep and waking, imagine the clouds above, forming their own language of navigation. The Polynesians knew that certain clouds, the towering cumulus formations that build above warm islands, could be seen from great distances. These te lapa clouds, tinted green from the reflection of shallow lagoons, or white from coral sand beaches, announced the presence of land long before the keenest eye could spot a shoreline. Watch the birds. Kahokane's voice grows softer still, blending with the whisper of wind through the sail. The great frigate birds and the white terns, they are our messengers. In the morning, they fly toward land to feed. In the evening, they return to their roosts. Follow their path, and they will lead you home. But you must read their urgency, their numbers, the height of their flight. Each detail tells part of the story. The phosphorescence in the water beneath your canoe begins to glow more brightly as microscopic organisms respond to the boat's movement. This living light, called aqua malama, or spirit light by some navigators, could reveal underwater coral formations and guide canoes through treacherous reefs in the darkness. The ocean itself becomes a lamp, lighting the way for those who understand its language. Feel your breathing slow and deepen as Kahokane shares the most sacred knowledge of the wave. The concept of itak, or moving island navigation, where the navigator imagines that instead of the canoe moving toward its destination, The destination island moves toward the canoe by fixing on a reference island off to one side. The navigator could track progress by watching how the positions of stars changed relative to that reference point. In your mind's eye, the navigator whispers, "Picture our destination island as a bird swimming toward us through the star field as we sail through the night. Watch how the constellation of the navigator's triangle shifts its position above that approaching island. When the stars align just so, we will know we have arrived at the edge of tomorrow." The genius of this system lies in its integration of multiple sources of information. No single sign was enough. The master navigator wove together star positions, wave patterns, cloud formations, bird behavior, water color, floating debris, and even the taste of the sea spray to create a complete picture of location and direction. This was navigation as high art, requiring not just technical skill but intuitive connection with the natural world. As the night deepens around your floating sanctuary, imagine the training of a young navigator beginning. Children as young as 5 would start learning to identify stars and their movements. They would memorize hundreds of traditional chants that encoded navigational information in story and song. The rising and setting points of stars, the seasonal changes in weather, patterns, the habits of seabirds, all were preserved in an oral tradition passed down through generations. "Sleep now," Kahokane murmurs, his voice becoming one with the eternal rhythm of waves against the hull. "Let your dreams carry you on the star paths our ancestors traveled. In your sleep, you too can become a wayfinder, guided by the ancient wisdom that connects all islands, all peoples, all hearts that yearn for home across the endless blue." The stars wheel slowly overhead as your consciousness gently releases its grip on the waking world. Somewhere in the vast Pacific night, the spirit of every Polynesian navigator who ever followed these celestial highways watches over your journey, their knowledge flowing through you like starlight on dark water, carrying you toward the peaceful shores of sleep. As your dreams carry you deeper into the realm of ancient Polynesia, the star-guided canoe beneath you begins to change course, following celestial pathways toward the most remote inhabited island on Earth. Feel the ocean currents shifting as you approach a place of profound mystery and haunting beauty, Rapa Nui, known to the world as Easter Island. A tiny speck of volcanic rock rising from the endless Pacific like a forgotten memory of the gods. The gentle motion of your dream vessel rocks you ever deeper into tranquility as the island emerges from morning mist ahead. Here, some 1,600 miles from the nearest populated land, stands one of humanity's most enigmatic achievements. Nearly 900 stone giants, the Moai, keep their eternal vigil across this triangular island, their massive forms silhouetted against the soft pastels of dawn. "Welcome to Te Pito o Te Henua," whispers an ancient voice carried on the trade winds, the navel of the world, as the island's first inhabitants knew their home. Here, where the ocean meets the sky at the edge of forever, our ancestors carved their dreams into stone and set them to guard the pathways between this world and the next. Let yourself sink deeper into the warm embrace of sleep as you approach the shore. The volcanic cliffs rise from crystal clear waters, and along the coastline, the first Moai come into view. These are not merely statues, but embodiments of ancestral spirits. The Arikimo, the living faces of chiefs and spiritual leaders who once guided their people across the vast Pacific to claim this remote sanctuary. Feel your breathing slow and deepen as you walk in dreams across the island's rolling grasslands. The Moai stand in groups along the ancient ceremonial platforms called ahu, their backs to the ocean, their weathered faces gazing eternally inland toward the heart of their island home. Each statue is unique, carved with distinctive features that once represented real people, real ancestors whose mana, spiritual power, was believed to flow through these stone vessels to protect and guide their descendants. Imagine yourself resting in the shadow of Rano Raraku, the quarry crater where most of the Moai were born from volcanic tuff. Here, nearly 400 statues remain in various stages of completion, some buried up to their necks by centuries of erosion and time. As you lie among these gentle giants, their presence radiates a profound peace, as if they are ancient guardians watching over your sleep. Listen, the island wind murmurs through the grass, and you will hear the story of the Rapa Nui people, who arrived here perhaps 1,500 years ago in great voyaging canoes, carrying with them the precious cargo of their entire civilization. Plants, animals, tools, and most importantly, the memories of their ancestors. In your peaceful drowsiness, picture the island as it once was, covered in palm forests that provided wood for canoes and rollers to move the massive statues. The crater lakes reflected towering palms, and the sounds of a thriving community echoed across the landscape. Gardens flourished in carefully tended plots, and the people developed a unique script called Rungarungo, one of the few writing systems ever created in Polynesia. The Moai themselves tell a story of incredible engineering and spiritual devotion. Carved with stone tools from the compressed volcanic ash of Rano Raraku, each statue required months or even years to complete. The largest, still partially buried in the quarry, stands over 30 feet tall and weighs more than 80 tons. Yet, somehow, using only ropes, wooden rollers, and human determination, the ancient Rapa Nui moved these giants across miles of rough terrain to their final resting places. Feel yourself drifting deeper as you imagine the great ceremonies that once took place here. The ahu platforms were not just statue bases, but sacred temples where the living community communed with their ancestors. During important rituals, the Moai were crowned with massive red stone cylinders called pukao, carved from a separate quarry and somehow lifted onto the heads of statues that already towered above the landscape. The statues were never meant to be empty stone. The ancestral voice continues, soft as sea foam on distant shores. When a chief died, his spirit was called into the Moai through sacred ceremonies. The statue's eye sockets, now empty, once held coral and obsidian eyes that gazed with the wisdom of the ancestors, watching over their people with eternal love. As you rest in this sacred landscape, the story grows more complex and ultimately more human. The island's isolation, which had protected it for so long, eventually became a challenge. The population grew, resources became scarce, and the great palm forests that had sustained the civilization gradually disappeared. The last tree may have been cut down to move one final statue, leaving the people without woods to fish the deep ocean or to escape their increasingly fragile island home. Yet even in hardship, the Rapa Nui people persevered, developing innovative farming techniques using stone mulch gardens called manavai that protected crops from salt spray and conserved precious fresh water. They created a new society adapted to their island's limits, and their cultural traditions evolved but never disappeared entirely. Let the gentle melancholy of this story wash over you like a lullaby. The decline of Rapa Nui's classical civilization offers a profound meditation on the relationship between human ambition and natural limits. But it is not ultimately a story of failure. It is a story of adaptation, of the enduring human spirit that finds ways to survive and maintain dignity even when dreams must be scaled down to match reality. Rest now among the Moai as the Southern Cross rises above the island. These stone guardians have weathered 1,000 storms, witnessed the rise and transformation of their civilization, and continue their patient vigil. In the 1960s, when Norwegian explorer Thor Heyerdahl brought world attention to the island, archaeologists began to understand that the Moai represented one of the most remarkable achievements in human history, a testament to what people can accomplish when guided by deep spiritual purpose. Today, the descendants of the original Rapa Nui people work to preserve and revitalize their culture. The Rongo script is being studied and slowly decoded. Traditional songs and dances are being taught to new generations. The Moai themselves have become symbols not just of mystery, but of resilience and the enduring power of human creativity. As sleep deepens around you, imagine the Moai as they truly are, not monuments to a lost civilization, but eternal bridges between past and future. Their stone faces, weathered by wind and rain but still strong, remind us that some things are built to last beyond the span of individual lives, beyond the rise and fall of societies, beyond the memory of their makers. Feel yourself becoming one with this timeless landscape, where the rhythm of waves against volcanic cliffs has not changed in 1,000 years. The Moai continue their watch, their invisible eyes seeing across dimensions of time and space, blessing all who come to this sacred place with the peace that comes from understanding our connection to something greater than ourselves. In your dreams tonight, you to become a guardian spirit, your consciousness joining the eternal vigil of Rapa Nui, watching over the world with the patient love of ancestors, your heart as steady and enduring as stone, your spirit as vast and serene as the Pacific Ocean that cradles this most remote of islands in its infinite blue embrace. Your dreaming spirit now drifts southward from the stone guardians of Rapa Nui, carried by the same celestial currents that once guided the great Navigator cube across 1,000 miles of open ocean. Feel the air growing cooler, touched with the clean scent of southern seas, as you approach a land unlike any other in Polynesia, Aotearoa, the land of the long white cloud, known to the modern world as New Zealand. Settle deeper into the embrace of sleep as your vision clears to reveal 2 magnificent islands rising from the Tasman Sea like sleeping giants. Here, where the subtropical Pacific meets the temperate Southern Ocean, the Polynesian voyagers encountered something extraordinary, a land vast enough to hold forests that stretched beyond the horizon, mountains that scraped the belly of the sky, and seasons that cycled through dramatic changes unknown on their tropical island homes. E Como, my whispers, the voice of Hinitiwawa, the grandmother of all waters. Her words carried on mists that rise from ancient fjords. Welcome to the last great landfall of the Polynesian migration, where our people's canoes came to rest at the edge of the world, and where they learned to become something new while honoring everything old. In your peaceful drowsiness, imagine yourself aboard the great Waka Tower, the voyaging canoe of Cuyp, the legendary navigator who first discovered these islands around 1,000 years ago. The double hull cuts through rolling swells as you follow the migration of the great whales, for it was a massive whale, Te Wikamuturangi, that first led Polynesian explorers to this distant shore. Feel the gentle rocking motion as your canoe enters the sheltered waters of a vast harbor. Before you stretches a landscape that must have seemed like a dream to those first arrivals. Rolling green hills, crowned with forests of trees so massive they could shelter entire villages. Rivers that ran clear and cold from snow-capped peaks, and beaches of black volcanic sand where waves whispered secrets in a different dialect than those of home. The Maori people, as they came to be known, were the descendants of those brave navigators who chose to make this challenging land their home. Unlike the small coral atolls and volcanic islands of tropical Polynesia, Aotearoa demanded new ways of living, new relationships with the natural world, and new forms of social organization to survive in a place where winter could bring snow and storms that would be unimaginable in the warm Pacific Islands. Let your breathing slow and deepen as you walk in dreams through the primeval forests of kauri trees, some so ancient they were already giants when the first Polynesian canoes arrived. Their massive trunks, smooth and straight as temple pillars, rise into a canopy so dense it creates its own weather system. Here, in the cathedral quiet of the bush, you can feel the mana of the land itself, a spiritual power different from that of the ocean, earthy and profound and patient as stone. Listen to the stories the trees remember, murmurs the wind through fern fronds as tall as houses. Each ring in their heartwood holds the memory of seasons, of the people who sheltered beneath their branches, of the songs that were sung and the ceremonies that blessed this land long before the world beyond these shores knew of its existence. In your tranquil state, picture the great migrations that brought wave after wave of Polynesian settlers to these shores. The legendary waka like Te Arawa, Tainui, and Tokatimu, each carrying not just people, but entire ways of life, the precious cargo of sweet potato and taro. The sacred fires kept burning throughout the long ocean crossings, the genealogies and stories that connected these new lands to the spiritual homeland of Havaiiki. Feel yourself drifting deeper as you imagine the development of Maori civilization in this unique environment. Without the coral reefs and tropical abundance of their ancestral islands, the people learned to harvest the forest and the sea in new ways. They discovered the massive moa birds, flightless giants that provided enough meat to feed entire communities. They learned to work the hard greenstone, paunamu, into tools and ornaments of extraordinary beauty. The PA fortifications, carved into hilltops throughout the islands, speak of a warrior culture that developed in response to competition for the best land and resources. Yet these were not merely places of war, but centers of community life, where intricate social hierarchies based on Wakapapa genealogical connections determined everything from marriage partners to access to fishing grounds. Watch the hands of the Tohunga Tamoko, whispers an ancestral voice as you sink deeper into dreams, as they tap the sacred spirals into warriors' faces. Each curve and line tells a story of ancestry, of achievements, of spiritual protection. The moko is not decoration, but identity made visible, the soul's history written in skin. In your peaceful reverie, witnessed the great ceremonial gatherings where hundreds of people would come together for weddings, funerals, and seasonal celebrations. The haka, those powerful dances of challenge and welcome, echo across the valleys as warriors stamp and chant, their movements telling stories of gods and heroes, of love and loss, of the eternal connection between the living and the dead. Mari, the sacred ceremonial grounds at the heart of every community, become places where you can rest your weary spirit. Here, beneath carved meeting houses, whose every beam and rafter represents an ancestor, the people gather to make decisions, to share food, to remember their stories, and to welcome visitors with the ancient rituals of hospitality that turn strangers into family. Feel the mist of geothermal springs warming your skin as you imagine the sacred sites where the earth itself speaks through bubbling pools and steaming vents. These places, where the spiritual world seems closest to the physical one, became centers of healing and prophecy, where Tohunga spiritual specialists would commune with the Atua, the gods who inhabited every aspect of the natural world. In Aotearoa, the grandmother voice continues, soft as rainfall on native bush. Our people learned that mana comes not just from the ocean and the stars, but from the mountains and forests, from the bones of the ancestors buried in the soil, from the Tanawa, the dragon spirits that inhabit the deepest lakes and most dangerous rapids. As sleep deepens around you, imagine the seasonal rhythms that governed life in this temperate paradise. The arrival of the godwits from their Arctic breeding grounds signaled the time for harvesting shellfish. The flowering of the Poatukawa trees marked the Maori New Year. The southern lights, Aurora Australis, dancing across winter skies, brought messages from the spirit world. Rest now in the knowledge that this great land at the bottom of the world became home to one of the most sophisticated Polynesian cultures, one that maintained its connection to the ocean-going traditions of its ancestors, while developing entirely new relationships with mountains, forests, and seasons. The Maori language preserved not just words, but entire ways of understanding the world, where every natural feature has its own personality, its own story, its own role in the great web of relationships that connects all living things. In your dreams tonight, you become part of this ancient understanding, your spirit taking flight like the albatross that soars above the southern Alps, your consciousness merging with the eternal rhythms of tide and season, mountain and sea. The mana of Aotearoa flows through you now, connecting you to ancestors whose bones have become part of this sacred land, whose stories continue to live in the wind that sighs through the beech forests and the waves that eternally caress these shores. Sleep peacefully now, cradled by the spirit of the long white cloud that gives this land its name, knowing that you too are part of the great story that began when the first brave navigators followed their stars to the edge of the world and found not an ending, but a new beginning, rich with possibilities as endless as the southern sky. As your dreaming spirit completes its journey through the ancient Pacific, Feel yourself gently returning to the present moment, carried not by the trade winds alone, but by the voices of those who refuse to let the old ways fade into memory. Here, in our modern world of satellites and GPS, something miraculous is happening. The revival of ancient Polynesian navigation, the awakening of sleeping languages, and the return of the voyaging canoes to waters they haven't crossed for generations. Settle deeper into the peaceful embrace of sleep as you witness one of the most remarkable stories of cultural renaissance in our time. On a beach in Hawaii, skilled hands are laying the keel of a new voyaging canoe built according to designs passed down through centuries but forgotten for nearly 200 years. This is Hawai'i, the Star of Gladness, and her maiden voyage in 1976 would prove to the world that the Polynesian navigators had not been lucky, they had been brilliant. Feel the awakening, whispers Nanoa Thompson, whose voice carries across the decades from that first historic voyage to Tahiti. When we stepped aboard Hawai'i without compass or charts, we were not just sailing to prove ancient capabilities, we were sailing toward the recovery of our souls, toward remembering who we are beneath the overlay of colonization and modernization. In your tranquil drowsiness, imagine yourself aboard this modern recreation of an ancient dream, watching Master Navigator Pius Mo Pialog from the Caroline Islands as he reads the ocean with senses that urbanized humanity had forgotten existed. His weathered hands feel the rhythm of swells through the hull, his eyes track the flight patterns of seabirds, his entire being attuned to subtleties of wind and water that no instrument can measure. Feel the gentle rocking motion as Hawai'i cuts through Pacific swells, her crew learning to navigate by stars as their ancestors did, rediscovering that the ocean is not an empty void but a highway marked by countless natural signs. After 34 days at sea, when the mountains of Tahiti appeared on the horizon, exactly where the ancient knowledge said they would be, it was more than a successful voyage, it was a resurrection of cultural possibility. Let your breathing slow and deepen as you witness the ripples spreading outward from that first journey. Across Polynesia, communities began to remember and reclaim traditions that had been pushed to the margins of their own lives. In New Zealand, the Maori language, which had nearly disappeared from daily use, began to flourish again in immersion schools where children learned to think and dream in the words of their ancestors. Listen to the voices of the keiki murmurs, a grandmother's voice from a Hawaiian language immersion classroom, as they discover that their native tongue is not a relic of the past, but a living key to understanding the world in ways that English cannot express. When they learn that rain has dozens of different names, depending on its quality and origin, they begin to see the world with the eyes of poets and scientists combined. In your peaceful reverie, picture the great cultural festivals that now celebrate Polynesian heritage with pride rather than apology. The Festival of Pacific Arts brings together thousands of performers, artists, and cultural practitioners from across Oceania, their songs and dances filling the air with rhythms that connect modern audiences to ancient truths. Traditional crafts that had nearly vanished, the weaving of pandanus, the carving of sacred wood, the creation of bark cloth, flourish again in workshops where elders pass their knowledge to eager young hands. Feel yourself drifting deeper as you witness the launch of other voyaging canoes inspired by Hawai'i's success. Te Arare from New Zealand, Hikianalia from Hawaii, Fofite from Tahiti, each vessel carrying crews who have dedicated years to learning the arts of traditional navigation. These are not museum pieces, but working ships, crossing thousands of miles of open ocean to prove that ancient wisdom remains viable in the modern world. The Pacific Voyaging Society has now completed voyages totaling more than 140,000 nautical miles, visiting dozens of islands and inspiring countless young Polynesians to reconnect with their maritime heritage. Each journey is both a practical demonstration of navigational skill and a spiritual pilgrimage, reminding participants that they are descended from the greatest ocean explorers in human history. Watch the transformation, whispers the spirit, of the ocean itself, as young people who once saw themselves as marginalized minorities discover they are heirs to oceanic civilizations that achieved what no other culture has accomplished: the settlement of 1/3 of the Earth's surface, using nothing but human courage, ingenuity, and spiritual connection to the natural world. In your dreams, witnessed the establishment of traditional navigation schools throughout Micronesia, where master navigators like Mo Pialog have trained a new generation of wayfinders. These schools preserve not just technical knowledge, but entire world views, teaching students to see themselves as part of the ocean's living system, rather than as separate from or superior to the natural world. Rest peacefully as you observe the revival of traditional ecological knowledge alongside navigational arts. Throughout Polynesia, communities are restoring ancient fish pond systems, replanting native forests, and rediscovering sustainable fishing practices that allowed their ancestors to thrive on isolated islands for over 1,000 years. Climate change and environmental degradation are being addressed, not just with modern technology, but with traditional wisdom about living in harmony with natural cycles. Feel the warmth of cultural pride spreading through island communities as their children learn traditional chants, dances, and crafts that were nearly lost. Dancers to genealogies, landscapes, and spiritual traditions. In Tahiti, traditional tattoo arts that were banned by missionaries for over a century have returned as expressions of cultural identity and spiritual protection. The voyaging canoes are just the beginning, murmurs the voice of cultural renaissance, soft as trade winds through palm fronds. They are symbols of a deeper awakening, the understanding that indigenous knowledge systems offer crucial insights for navigating not just oceans, but the challenges of modern life. The same principles that guided canoes across the Pacific: careful observation, adaptive thinking, community cooperation, and respect for natural forces can guide us toward sustainable futures. As your consciousness settles into the deepest levels of peaceful sleep, imagine the next generation of Polynesian youth, equally at home with smartphones and star compasses, with social media and traditional chants. They are not choosing between modernity and tradition, but weaving them together in new patterns, creating hybrid identities that honor the past while embracing the future. In universities around the Pacific, scholars are documenting and digitizing traditional knowledge, creating archives that will preserve ancestral wisdom while making it accessible to future generations. The same GPS technology that has made traditional navigation seem obsolete is now being used to map and protect sacred sites, to track the migration patterns of sea turtles and whales, and to monitor the health of coral reefs. Sleep now in the knowledge that the spirit of the ancient Polynesian navigators lives on in every person who chooses to see the ocean as a highway rather than a barrier. That true wealth lies not in dominating nature, but in living as part of its eternal cycles. The voyaging canoes continue to sail, carrying new generations of wayfinders toward horizons bright with possibility. In your dreams tonight, you too become part of this continuing story, your spirit joining the great migration that began thousands of years ago and continues still. Who has ever read its moods? Every culture that has ever called it home. As you sleep, you become part of that memory, part of the eternal conversation between human dreams and oceanic realities. Our place in the vast blue world that connects all shores, all peoples, all hearts that beat in rhythm with the tides. The stars that guided the first Polynesian navigators still shine above us tonight, their light carrying the same messages of direction and possibility. Rest peacefully now, knowing that you are connected to this great tradition of exploration and discovery, that somewhere in your dreams, ancient canoes still sail across starlit seas, carrying the wisdom of the ages toward whatever shores tomorrow may reveal. And so, our journey across the vast Pacific comes to its gentle close, like a voyaging canoe finally reaching the calm waters of a protected lagoon after months at sea. You have traveled with the greatest navigators in human history, witnessed the birth of civilizations on remote islands, and felt the eternal rhythms that connect all ocean peoples to the heartbeat of the earth itself. Rest deeply now, cradled by the same trade winds that once filled the sails of ancient Polynesian vessels. Feel yourself floating peacefully on waters that have carried dreams and stories across thousands of miles and hundreds of generations. The ocean beneath you holds the memory of every voyage ever taken, every island ever discovered, every moment of wonder when navigators first glimpsed new lands rising from the endless blue above you. The Southern Cross continues its eternal rotation, the same constellation that guided Polynesian voyagers to every corner of the Pacific Triangle. Canopus, the second brightest star in our sky, maintains its faithful watch, still pointing the way toward home for any traveler who knows how to read its message. These celestial guides have not changed since the first double-hulled canoe pushed off from the shores of distant Havaiiki, and they will continue their vigil long after our own brief passage through this world. Listen to the gentle lapping of waves against the hull of your dream vessel, a rhythm as old as the moon's pull on, the tides as constant as the breath in your lungs. This is the ocean's lullaby, the same sound that soothed the children of Polynesian navigators as they slept in the holds of voyaging canoes, secure in the knowledge that their parents could read the sea's moods and guide them safely to whatever shores awaited beyond the horizon. Feel your consciousness merging with the great blue consciousness of the Pacific, where distances are measured not in miles but in the rhythm of swells, where direction comes not from instruments but from the flight of birds and the taste of water on the wind. You are becoming one with the oceanic mind that sees no barriers between islands, only pathways connecting one home to another across the curved surface of our water world. The stories you have heard tonight are not endings but beginnings, not conclusions but invitations to dream deeper, to understand that we are all navigators on the sea of existence. all readers of signs, both subtle and profound. The wisdom of the Polynesian wayfinders lives on in anyone who pays attention to natural rhythms, who respects the intelligence of traditional knowledge, who understands that true wealth lies in relationships rather than possessions, in your dreams. The boundary between past and present dissolves like morning mist over a tropical lagoon. You may find yourself paddling alongside Cuyp as he discovers Aotearoa, standing with the carvers of Rapa Nui as they shape their stone ancestors, learning star patterns from master navigators whose knowledge spans generations of careful observation and spiritual connection to the cosmos. Sleep now in the embrace of the great ocean mother, Namaka, whose waters connect all shores and whose tides synchronize all hearts to the fundamental rhythms of existence. Feel yourself becoming lighter, more transparent, until you are like sea foam dancing on the crests of waves, like moonlight scattered across the surface of an endless sea, like wind singing through the rigging of a canoe that sails between sleeping and waking, between memory and dream. The manna of Polynesia flows through your resting body now, the spiritual power that connects ancestors to descendants, that links the smallest coral polyp to the largest whale, that makes every grain of sand on every beach part of the same eternal story of creation and transformation. You are held in this web of connection, supported by invisible currents of love and wisdom that have sustained Pacific peoples for over 1,000 years. Tomorrow, when you wake, you will carry with you the memory of this journey, the knowledge that you too are descended from navigators who crossed impossible distances, guided by stars and intuition, who settled new lands with nothing but courage and wisdom, who created communities based on sharing and respect for the natural world that sustained them. But tonight you belong to the timeless realm where the sea kings still rule, where voyaging canoes sail between islands that exist only in dreams, where the aurora australis dances with the spirits of ancestors across southern skies, where every wave carries messages of love from shores you have never seen but somehow remember, as home. Rest in perfect peace, dear traveler, knowing that the ocean holds you safely in its ancient arms, that the stars above sing lullabies in languages older than words, that the gentle rocking of eternity will carry you through dreams as vast and deep as the Pacific itself, toward dawns bright with the promise of new discoveries, new connections, new understanding of your place in the magnificent tapestry of existence. Sleep beneath the southern stars and dream the dreams of the Sea Kings of Polynesia, whose voyages continue in every heart that yearns for horizons beyond the visible world, whose wisdom lives on in every soul that finds direction not in instruments but in the quiet voice of intuition that whispers, always and forever, the way home.